But 12,000 pages survive, and that's what I've been working on for 40 years.
Yeah. 40 years.
12,000 pages of court minutes, council minutes, correspondence, land records, notarial records, which indicate marriages and deaths, surveys, inventories of estates.
Damn. Respect, man. Wow. 40 years of all this. Damn. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Johan, and I'm just a typical Dutchman. And I often wonder, why is there such a big gap in how Europe and the United States understand each other? What is missing in either US history education or in European history education that creates this gap? And to find out, I dive into the American history to see where this started and maybe point out the things that we do different than the United States does. And if you want to join me, make sure that you like and subscribe so we can make this gap of understanding closer, and by doing more promotion for this channel. So, like and subscribe. And today I'm reacting to a TED Talk that I saw yesterday while finishing editing my previous video about New Netherland, the best kept secret in the American history. And I was wondering, yeah, I know what happened, because in all the videos I saw until now, I know that there were in the 13 colonies and we had French colonies, but there were Dutch colonies also, and they were there for a short moment and then they were gone. And nobody explained to me what happened to the New Netherlands. So I'm very curious what this TED Talk is explaining, is telling me how this happened. So let's take a look together.
When I started translating the 17th century Dutch records of New Netherland,
Oh, he's one of the translators. Where we saw, yeah, those 2.5 years work, and then it went up into fire or so. Okay, let's see.
which, by the way, are the earliest records of New York State, 40 years ago, I ran across a quotation from a historian, which bothered me at first, but I figured I'd have to do something about it. He said that New Netherland was the best kept secret of the history of the United States, or of America, the best kept secret. And I could see that because I was translating at a desk in the back of a room. I had no telephone. I had no typewriter. I had practically nothing but a flat surface and access to the Dutch records when I began. Where did these records come from? They're generated by the Dutch over a period of 60 years. Hudson, as you know, came from he was supposed to go to the east over Siberia. This was a contract that was drawn up by the East India Company in 1609. Instead, he turned and went the other way when he ran into heavy ice floes and his crew was about to mutiny. He came down the coast, was blown off course almost to Cape Hatteras, went up into Delaware Bay, all the way up the Hudson to about where the Patroon Island Bridge is today. Came back out and sailed back to England, but his journal made it back, and the ship eventually made it back to the Netherlands.
Hudson. So Hudson as Captain Hudson, because he's talking about Hudson went up to this river until a certain ridge and then came back. So the Hudson River, named after a Dutch captain. I don't know a Dutch captain named Hudson, so maybe.
This allowed the Dutch to lay claim to this area. No one had laid claim to it before. Apparently the English simply assumed that it would be theirs, but the Dutch made a good case by right of exploration. So the territory of the Dutch ran from Delaware Bay all the way to Cape Cod originally, until the English kept pushing them further and further to the west, eventually to the Fresh River, as they called it, the Versrivier, or the Connecticut River, and then eventually in about as far as here. The Dutch were lucky in being able to lay claim to the one area below the St. Lawrence River Valley that had an access to the interior of the country. New England was sitting on a shelf with no way of getting to the Indians who were bringing furs in from the west. And Virginia and Maryland were in the same situation until the 1750s when the...
Yeah, that's my problem. He's talking about a lot of places in the United States, and I have no clue where these places are. So I'm looking at the map, this map. Where is it? And all I see here is Nova Belgica, and I already have seen this map. It was New Belgium, and then this is Dutch, New Netherland, with an extra T, Old Dutch, I guess. But yeah, he's talking about places I do not know. So hopefully you guys do know what he's talking about. The places.
Cumberland Gap is open. The Dutch dominated the fur trade as a result of this. They had a trading post here at Fort Orange.
He's marking it with his, but I don't see any dot on the map. No. So, no clue, but we were there. But I already did know that we were there in the United States.
They had a village or settlement at Manhattan. Furs were brought in from the west by the Indians. They traded at the trading post at Fort Orange.
Manhattan was what we now know as New York, previously known as New Amsterdam. I already did know, but Fort Orange, he's talking about Fort Orange, and Fort Orange was more, I believe, either, I'm not seeing where Manhattan is right now, but was either somewhere up this river or somewhere up this river. We had Fort Orange, and then New Amstel were at this part of the river.
Brought in from the west by the Indians. They traded at the trading post at Fort Orange. They were brought down and then sent to Europe. Over the years, 17 settlements were established in New Netherland.
17. I only know 3. 17 settlements, yes?
Some 9,000 people lived here when the English arrived in 1664. For 9 years, the English worked with the Dutch, more or less, and then the Dutch came back during the Third Anglo-Dutch War and repossessed this whole area for about 14 months, and then it was negotiated away to the English.
Okay, as base of the Third Dutch Anglo War, we still have the Fourth Dutch Anglo War, and I know when that part happened. I will show it in the next video. But the Third Anglo War, and then we gave them away. 9,000 Dutchmen, 17 colonies, giving away to the British.
And became permanently New York. Now, how deep a footprint did the Dutch make when they were here? Some writers have said that it was a minimal. In fact, some writers don't even like to talk about the Dutch because it's...
What? We did a lot.
inconvenient when they want to get to the revolution as quickly as possible.
Yeah, we were there. We were at the revolution.
Using myself as an example, I grew up in a small village in the Mohawk Valley called Nelliston. I was born in Fort Plain across the river, and after World War II, my father bought a house in Nelliston. It's very close to Gehring, where the beechnut baby food plant used to be. Some of you may be familiar with it, but it's right in the center of the Mohawk Valley. Our house was surrounded by families with names such as Van Alstein, Van Vechten, Van Schaik, Van Steenbergen, Van Valkenburg.
All Dutch, yeah. Van Valkenburg, Van Steenbergen, Van... what else did he say?
Van Schaik,
Van Schaik, yeah.
Van Steenbergen, Van Valkenburg. They weren't considered immigrants. They weren't considered even Dutch. They were considered Old Dutch. Whenever I asked as a kid, they were Old Dutch, and I had this feeling that they had been there forever. And there were other immigrants coming in at that time, Germans and Italians and so forth, but nothing like these established families, the Vans. There were also other Dutch families, Timmerman family, I remember, and there were a bunch of carpenters.
The Vans, but it's not the family Van. Van is a middle name. So your first name, middle name, surname, and not most, but when you use a middle name, it's Van, or Van de, of then, yeah, Van de.
They had translated their name from Timmerman to carpenter, as was very common at that time. The Kappers became Coopers, and so forth. My father had chickens out back. It was my job to feed the chickens every day. I went out with a bag of corn, and I'd go kip, 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 and the chickens would come running.
Kip, 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 yes. It's a Dutch language, kip. A chicken called in Dutch is kip, 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 kip. Yeah, I know.
Well, they knew I had corn, too. But kip is chicken in Dutch. We used to go out playing in farmers' fields. Our village was surrounded by dairy farms. I'd come home after crawling through barbed wire fences with corner cuts in my pants. And my mother would say, "I see you got another winkelhawk in your pants."
Oh, winkelhaak. Oh, it sounds like he had Dutch parents.
Does anyone here familiar with the term winkelhawk?
Winkelhaak, yeah. It's a 90-degree rip in your trouser or in your jacket. It's exactly a 90-degree rip in two, and that's called a 90-degree hook. Or we also call those as a tool, winkelhaak. It's a tool.
As a corner cut. A winkelhaak is a carpenter's square in Dutch. And it's the term that was used for that corner cut that you get in denim fabric when you catch it on a barbed wire fence. During recess, I remember 3rd, 4th grade, we would go out at 10 o'clock and we would play knickers.
Knikkeren, knickers, knikkeren, yeah.
Or knickers, K-N-I-K, like a knickerbocker. Knickerbocker means marble baker in Dutch. And everybody had a bag of marbles, and we'd go out and play knickers. There are all kinds of terms like this that I didn't realize until I left the area that these were uncommon terms.
But he translated the Dutch papers into English. But he is not Dutch on his own. It's
uncommon terms in West Virginia, for example, where I went to school for a while. But what about other evidence of this footprint, the depth of the footprint. The Dutch left behind 12,000 pages of documents. Some of them were destroyed in the 1911 fire and in other calamities that occurred over the years, the revolution. They were kept on warships, prison ships by the English in the harbor, where they were eaten by rats because of the paste sizing on the documents. But 12,000 pages survive, and that's what I've been working on for 40 years.
Yeah. 40 years.
12,000 pages of court minutes, council minutes, correspondence, land records, notarial records, which indicate marriages and deaths, surveys, inventories of estates.
Damn. Respect, man. Wow. 40 years of all this. Damn.
We have the inventory of Jonas Bronk's house that the Bronx is named after. It gives a description of his entire library. That leads us to the question of so what?
So what?
And this is the question that you always have to answer, no matter what research you're doing. Is so what? Why am I wasting my time even listening to you right now?
Yeah. What? Why?
The Dutch brought over many attributes. One of the things they brought over was a diversity of population. They brought over, because their population in the Netherlands at that time was very diverse. Think of the mid-1600s. Not only did you have all kinds of climate problems, but you had the 30 Years' War, which was causing a displacement of thousands and thousands of people. Many of them ended up in the Netherlands, not only because it was convenient to come down the three major river systems which lead to the Netherlands, the Scheldt, the Maas, and the Rhine, but because they had a very good social welfare system. They took care of their poor. The Netherlands was the place to go. They also had an outlet to the new worlds. They had the East India Company and the West India Company that they could sign on to and go off to the Far East, where they would never be seen again, usually, or to the New World in North America. It's very easy to make the argument, when you look at the statistics and the people who are coming over here, that this is the origin of the melting pot, is New Netherland. New England, the tobacco colonies of Virginia and Maryland are very homogeneous, but New Netherland is very diverse in its population. Several other attributes that they brought over: social mobility. If you had ambition and talent, you could move up the social ladder and then marry someone who had a lot of money. And this was a very typical Dutch way of getting ahead. Once you reached a certain status, you could argue that you should be part of this family. The Schuyler's, for example, they started as riverboatmen in the Rhine, but they soon went right to the top. In fact, one of them became a general, a very famous general in the Revolution. The other attribute is toleration.
Yeah, tolerance. We are tolerant, not to the max, but more tolerant than most other. Yeah, especially the British in that time.
Toleration, when I say toleration, I intend freedom of conscience. The Dutch West India Company didn't allow anyone here but Dutch Reformed. That was the only religion that was sanctioned. And I think it's because it concentrated all the money they were getting for social welfare to come into one program, to the deacons' accounts, rather than being dispersed. Freedom of conscience allowed anyone to believe in whatever they wanted: Quakers, Lutherans, Anabaptists, who were called Wiederdopers, those who baptized again. It allowed them to live without being persecuted. The Dutch survived here for a long period of time, much longer than the English takeover in 1664. There's an interesting anecdote among the scholars. In the 1880s, they describe how they would have Sunday dinner. All of the scholars in the area would come to the house. They would have this big meal. Afterwards, the men would go to the billiard room to play billiards, smoke cigars, drink brandy, and so forth. The women would all go into the kitchen and speak Dutch. This was 1880. The Dutch language survived for a long period of time because it was a part of their identity, a part of their heritage, and it survived among the women the longest because they were the ones who were isolated, unfortunately, out in the countryside. The men would go in and they would have to become bilingual in order to become part of the economy. But the women were home. They raised the children to become bilingual as well, to learn Dutch. So this
The children also became bilingual. Learn them Dutch.
is why Dutch survived for a long period of time. Cervantes once wrote of translators, and I always took this to heart myself, that a translation is like a carpet viewed on the reverse side, where you see all of the threads and can barely make out the design of this beautiful fabric on the reverse. This is pretty much what New Netherland was when I started. It was a carpet in reverse. We're slowly turning the carpet over, and I hope someday you'll be able to see the entire design. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. The New Netherlands and the New Netherland colonies, they were still there. That's the best kept secret in American history. Yeah, we did a lot. I know we did something more in the revolution, and he did not tell that about the part of the New Netherlands and the Dutch in general. So hopefully we will see much more of them in other videos. If you like the video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.